Kevin Harvick is on pace to win 15 races this year. I think he might do it. How's it going, everybody? My name is Eric, and welcome back after about a week and a half off. Welcome back to Out of the Groove. Again, thanks everyone for sticking with me through the little short hiatus. I was on vacation, partying it up with the mouse himself, doing all that. You know, it's end of semester, end of finals. You just had to take a week to kind of just let loose. But anyway, now I am back and a couple days late still. I got home Saturday afternoon, so I saw the race at Kansas Saturday night. I'll talk about that mostly in a minute. Unfortunately, I was really busy yesterday, and I've been really busy today, so that's why this video is kind of late, and I got a lot of stuff to talk about this week, and I got a lot of stuff to do, so it's going to be wild. I want to thank the newest Patreon supporters. If you want to sponsor Out of the Groove, sponsor this show, you can check out the link down below. I want to shout that out really quick, so thanks everyone for checking that out. Now let's see what we're talking about today. A brief rundown from this weekend's race at Kansas. I don't want to sit here and just tell you exactly what happened, but basically the gist of it was the first 230 laps or so of a 267 lap race were fairly uneventful. I think you only had 2 or 3 passes for the lead under green. The race was dominated by Harvick. You saw Larson come from the back, which was fun to see. He came from the back and was great in stage 3. Truex led a little bit. I think Blaney was up towards the front a little bit. You know, you had a few different drivers, but really only a couple lead changes. Not a ton of passing for position, and ultimately no pre-planned cautions. There was a competition caution on lap 30 and 2 stage breaks, but for the first 230 laps, there were no spins, no debris cautions, no anything. The final 35, 36 laps or so, things got crazy. We saw a couple of big multi-car wrecks. Favorites get taken out, pit strategy, cycle people to the back, to the front. You had Harvick having to go take 4 tires and have to rocket back to the lead late to win the race. You had some of the best racing I've seen on mile and a halves. And I say best racing, I know there's wrecks, and people don't like to talk about wrecks. I'll get into that later. But it was one of the most dramatic, one of the most eventful finishes to a mile and a half race you can get. So anyway, that's the gist of it. Let's focus on some of the key takeaways. And I'm going to focus first. There's really the only takeaway I had for the first 230 lap stretch is that mile and a half racing at night is not very exciting, and these cars, we've all talked about this before, the cars and their aero package are not super great for mile and a half racing, especially at night when grip is better and cars are just not sliding around as bad. It's just not great. But from a competition standpoint, we got to talk about Hendrick Motorsports, because Kyle Larson, who started in the rear, drove up to the front and ultimately had the lead late in stage 3 and looked like he was going to win the race before a wreck, which I'll talk about again in a minute. But Kyle Larson proved this weekend that the Chevy struggles. We've talked a lot about how Chase Elliott and Jimmy Johnson and Hendrick Motorsports has not looked as good as they have in years past. We've talked a lot about that. Kyle Larson proved this weekend that that is primarily a Hendrick Motorsports issue, and that Chevy and their new Camaro should not take most of the blame. In the first 2 stages of the race, Hendrick Motorsports, pretty much all their cars were outside the top 10, top 15 almost the entire time. Jimmy Johnson was laps down. He had a tire issue too that put him multiple laps down. He was irrelevant. Bowman ultimately got caught up in a wreck with Daniel Suarez. William Byron wrecked out late in the race. Chase Elliott, I think, used some pit strategy to maybe get a decent finish, but I think he ended up finishing 12th or 13th. So at the end of the day, no Hendrick Motorsports cars anywhere near the front of the pack at all. At any point during the race, they were garbage. Meanwhile, Kyle Larson started in the rear, drove all the way up to the front. Like I said, led a bunch of laps, looked like he was going to win. Kyle Larson was outstanding. And now we've talked about this year. The new Camaro for Chevy, it was going to take some time for them to fully get a hang of it. Much like Toyota last year with the new Camry, took them a couple months before they really turned into a dominant team. And Chevy is also doing that same thing. So we got to look at it as a Chevy issue and a Camaro issue to some extent. But it seems clear to me that some teams like Larson and Chip Ganassi Racing and maybe RCR here at times have started to get a little bit better handle on the car. They're running at least as well as they did last year now, it seems. Meanwhile, Hendrick Motorsports has continuously slipped further and further behind the other Chevys. And this is big to point out because Hendrick Motorsports is the biggest and has been the most successful Chevy team, arguably the most successful team in NASCAR for the last 25 years. So this is significant, to say the least. And I know nobody's been wanting to jump to conclusions all year because it's all been like, oh, well, the Chevys will take some time to get used to the Camaro, but oh, the Hendrick will be great by the end of the season. Johnson will be in the playoffs. Elliott will be a championship contender. Everything's going to be fine. And I'm here to tell you right now, things are not fine for Hendrick Motorsports. No. Yeah, I'm seeing some alarming similarities between Hendrick Motorsports this year and a little bit last year and what happened to Roush Fenway Racing several years ago. It's been well documented. After Matt Kenseth left Roush Fenway at the end of 2012, that team struggled a little bit in 2013. Stenhouse came to that 17 car and was not good. He didn't win a race for 5 years. After 2014, Carl Edwards left, and then that team was really struggling. They had two young drivers, Trevor Bayne and Ricky Stenhouse, with an aging Greg Biffle who was past his prime, and that team ever since then has shrunk from being a 5-car team with all 5 cars in the playoffs in 2005 to now in 2018 they are a 2-car team with one driver actually splitting time with Matt Kenseth because they brought him in because they were desperate. So Roush Fenway Racing has seriously fallen from grace in a relatively short amount of time. And let's look at Hendrick Motorsports now. Jeff Gordon, a longtime veteran who's won championships for this team, he's gone. They replaced him with Chase Elliott, who's very good, don't get me wrong, I'm very high on Chase Elliott, but he's not Jeff Gordon, and he's not looking like he's very close to Jeff Gordon, at least not yet. He is young. They had Casey Kane, who was probably the weakest link at Hendrick Motorsports the last 4 years, but still a solid driver, still won races. They replaced him with William Byron, who's, like 19, 20 years old? Very little experience. They had Dale Earnhardt Jr., who won races, never won a championship, but won a lot of races, a very strong veteran presence in that team. He's gone, and they replaced him with Alex Bowman, who this is his first year in somewhat decent equipment. And again, very little experience. So much like how Roush Fenway Racing paired veteran Greg Biffle with 2 young drivers that were pretty unproven, Hendrick Motorsports has taken veteran Jimmy Johnson and surrounded him with 3 young, unproven drivers. And guess what? 2018, they've been pretty lousy, Jimmy included. Meanwhile, we've looked at Stewart Haas Racing that got rid of Danica Patrick and brought in another veteran in Eric Almirola. That's a team now with 4 veteran drivers on that team, and they look impossible to beat. So basically, could Hendrick Motorsports really be on the decline, and possibly on a permanent decline? We see how Roush Fenway Racing has brought Matt Kenseth back to hopefully try and save that team. We'll see as time goes on if that helps at all, but I can't imagine it's going to help too much. It's unlikely Roush will ever get back to how they were in the mid-2000s. So with Hendrick Motorsports, are their best days permanently behind them? I mean, I think Jimmy Johnson, I think most of the cars on that team could still make the playoffs. I don't think they all will. I think maybe 1 or 2 will. But they all are still playoff contenders, but a year or 2 down the road, Hendrick Motorsports might only be a 3-car team. Maybe none of them make the playoffs. When Jimmy retires, they're going to really be in trouble. So I just see alarming similarities between the downfall of Roush and what could be the downfall of Hendrick. I just want to bring that up. So that was my big takeaway from the first, 75% of this race. Let's look at, I want to focus now the rest of this episode on the end of the race and compare it to a bunch of things. So late in stage 3, Kyle Larson had a lead, and then Daniel Suarez got sideways and wrecked himself and Alex Bowman, so that brought out a caution, and that stacked things up. On the next restart, like we've seen so much this year, Kyle Larson, a relatively young driver, got just outskilled by a veteran in Kevin Harvick. I think most of us would say Kyle Larson had at least as good, if not a better car than Kevin Harvick at that point in the race, and had the preferred line, had control in the restart, and Harvick still beat him. Harvick drove out to the lead, Kyle Larson fell back to 3rd, and then he and Ryan Blaney got together. Ryan Blaney, aggressively side drafting, just wrecked them both. I don't know what Blaney did there, mostly wrecked himself. Tough break for Larson, he now had some damage, but this opened up pit stops with less than 20 laps to go, and we had some differing strategies. Kevin Harvick decided to pit for 4 tires. I think 6 cars stayed out completely with less than 20 to go. William Byron was 7th on 2 tires, and then Harvick was 8th on 4, and everyone else had 4. So this is where things got really exciting. On the next restart, we had a huge pileup where William Byron got sideways, collected Clint Boyer, landed on top of Ryan Newman's car. Newman's always got cars on top of him. McMurray, Matt Kenseth unfortunately got involved. It was a big, massive pileup, a huge hit from William Byron. It was really great to see him walk away from that wreck, and it was a big moment. They red flagged the race, but when they eventually went back under yellow and then restarted again with, I think, like 10 laps to go, less than 10 laps to go, Truex at this point had the lead on old tires. Kevin Harvick got an amazing restart, rocketed to the front, got into 2nd place, and then with a couple laps to go, managed to chase down and pass Truex. Kevin Harvick got the win. That's a summary of that final half a stage, the final 30 laps or so, because I want to focus on that, because that was really the only entertaining aspect of this race. The first 230 laps were garbage. And I say that's subjective. Obviously, some people probably enjoyed the race, but I think it's fair to say the first 230 laps of this race with no cautions other than the stage breaks, with very, very, very few lead changes, with just Kevin Harvick and Kyle Larson really being the dominating cars for most of it, I think it's safe to say that aspect of the race was a 3 out of 10. I would give that amount. I was kind of interested, but not really. It was a 3 out of 10. Meanwhile, the final 30 laps, I'm going to be completely honest. The final 30 laps, even with all the big wrecks, all the big dangerous fiery crashes, It was a 9 or a 10. I was fully invested. I didn't know who was going to win. I loved the different pit strategy. The wrecks were fun. I welcomed the wrecks at that point. And this is what I want to get into, because this is a thing that I know a lot of race fans, older race fans especially, and I think a lot of younger race fans now too, really hate to hear NASCAR fans say that they like wrecks. They act like that is, sort of like if you're only watching NASCAR and you only like the wrecks, that doesn't mean you really like racing. That doesn't make you a real fan. That's the idea, and I want to kind of argue against that really quick, because I think this race really destroys the argument that wrecks are bad for the sport. I want to ask the question: is it still possible to enjoy the spectacle and drama caused by big wrecks while not necessarily rooting for them to occur? Because like I said, the first 80% of this race was a 3 out of 10, whereas the final 30 laps were an 8, 9, or a 10 out of 10. And I think the majority of fans watching that race would agree with me that the race was not nearly as exciting until all the wrecks and pit strategy began. And now this is something I've been saying for a long time. Wrecks are not required for good racing. There can be great racing without wrecks. You don't need to have wrecks to make racing good. And that's what I want to make clear. I'm not saying that you need wrecks to make a good race. No. But I'm saying wrecks can sometimes help. I look at Indianapolis last year as an example of where too much wrecking. I mean, the end of that race, there was wrecks everywhere. It was ridiculous. I did not enjoy it. There was too many wrecks. Or some would argue this year's Daytona 500 had too many unnecessary wrecks, and that made it less exciting or less entertaining than it should have been. So wrecks do not 100% equal entertainment, but my point is, wrecks are what set NASCAR apart from other sports, especially other motorsports. These cars are so secure, so big, so powerful, so strong, so safe these days for the drivers. Obviously, drivers can still get hurt. We've seen it, and that's why people don't like to root for wrecks. But the occasional fender bender can really add some drama, can really create some spark, some energy to what could be an otherwise relatively uneventful race. If you want to watch racing purely for the precision and accuracy of cars and lap by lap, clicking off lap times, if you want to watch that, go watch F1. That's what F1's for, and that's why people who root for F1 often see themselves as, it's the more highbrow racing series, Meanwhile, NASCAR is more the rough and tumble, I don't know, the stereotypes kind of ring true in this case. NASCAR is into physical contact, we want some wrecking, we want shoving and people fighting after the race. The stereotypes kind of hold up. But the stereotypes exist because that's really what sets these series apart. I mean, NASCAR cars are built to withstand some contact. And so while there are plenty of great races out there, great finishes, great races in general that don't have very many wrecks or don't rely on wrecks, I mean, go on YouTube and look up NASCAR. Most of the most viewed videos will be wrecks and fights because they're spectacular to watch. When you see a car flipping, the engine flying out of the thing, there's no other series, no other sport, no other event on earth that can show you something like that, and NASCAR does. And well, obviously, if a driver gets hurt, it's not great. I'm not necessarily going to sit here and root for cars to flip over every week, but in a race like Kansas, if a car spins out and backs it into the wall, I'm going to welcome it from time to time because that's dramatic and fun for a lot of fans. We don't want anyone to get hurt, that's obvious, and that's why I think when people say, oh, I like wrecks, they're like, oh, you heathen, you just want people to get hurt, people could die. And I get it, we get it, NASCAR's dangerous, football's dangerous, people root for big hits. When a guy hits a big tackle, it's like, oh, what a nice shot, but football, people like freaking lose consciousness every week. And we root for that. So I don't understand the double standard with NASCAR. I can root for wrecks. I'm going to root for wrecks sometimes. I'm going to sit there and, if the race is 230 laps with no cautions and it looks like Harvick or somebody's going to run away with it with a 10-second lead, pardon me for hoping that, Trevor Bayne or someone back there or Chris Buescher backs it into the wall just for fun. I mean, look at NASCAR's YouTube channel. They upload highlights from the race every week, and almost every single highlight is just a wreck. Oh, highlight, lap 75, Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch, wreck. Oh, what a highlight. They never post highlight videos of, oh, look at this highlight. Kevin Harvick wins the race off pit road. What a dramatic turn of events. They don't post those because those aren't entertaining to people. At least not the way wrecks are. So I guess, I think I've gotten a little off topic here. But I just want to make the argument that, while wrecks are not required for good NASCAR racing, they're not required. Sometimes they can help. And in this weekend's race at Kansas, this race would have been a complete wash if not for all the crazy wrecks at the end of this thing. It shook things up. At the end of the day, one of the most deserving, if not the most deserving driver, still won the race because he's a very talented driver on a good team. And then we had some spectacular moments. Nobody got seriously injured. Obviously, I know William Byron took a big hit. I'm super glad he walked away. But, in a day and age where NASCAR's trying to set itself apart, trying to stay relevant, stay entertaining, what's the biggest thing that probably sets NASCAR apart from other racing series? It's the big wrecks. It's the big wrecks that NASCAR causes. I think they're part of the sport and not necessarily something that should be celebrated, but definitely not something they should be shamed, Anyway, that's just me. I had this kind of eye-opening, awakening moment while I was sitting there watching the race Saturday night, where I'm like, this race really, I was about to turn it off. 200 laps in, I was this isn't fun. I have other things I wanted to do. I had other things. I was just get home from vacation. I had to unpack. I had other things I wanted to do. I just really didn't care about the race. But then when Suarez and Bowman got involved, and then we had the differing pitch strategies, we had Larson lose the lead and wreck. You had all these different things. It got exciting, and I was then fully invested. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. Do you guys agree with me? Do you guys completely disagree with me? That's what I always like to hear. Leave a comment down below, and yeah, thanks for watching. I know I didn't talk about the results of this race too much. I'm still extremely busy this week, unfortunately. My summer kind of break really doesn't kick off until next week, so I'm still really busy. I have an episode I wanted to upload in a couple days. I gotta talk about, I know they just today announced that sports gambling will be legalized, or at least will be up for, the states to potentially legalize on a state-by-state basis, so I gotta talk about that. I want to spend a little bit more time talking about Kevin Harvick's dominance, because when you win 5 out of 12 races to start a season, you deserve to have some conversation about you. I want to talk about a few other drivers from this race, but I think I hit on the biggest things. The biggest things: Hendrick Motorsports, the wrecks, the race itself. I think I hit on the biggest things. So thanks everyone for watching. Thanks to our Patreon supporters, our sponsors here. Thank you so much to those of you who choose to pledge on Patreon, and thanks for everyone else who checks that link out down below and helps out the show. It really means a lot to me. Thanks everyone so much. Follow me on Twitter at Dex Racing, and all that great stuff. So thanks everyone. Glad to be back. Gonna hit the ground running this summer with a lot more episodes, a lot more fun racing stuff to talk about. I'm excited. Hope you guys are too. Thanks everyone.